Welcome to 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Galatians with Dan Shields.
The wind stopped as the air grew thick and still, enveloping the young rider. In the darkening forest, the leaves lowered their heads, and the birds stopped singing, as if waiting in ominous foreboding of what was to come. All was quiet. Only his horse broke the stillness, moving in a tense paranoia, as if she too knew what was about to happen. The low rumble of thunder crept closer and closer and became louder, and no matter how fast the young man rode, he knew the violent storm was catching up and would soon overtake him. The slate-gray clouds began pouring their menace of water onto rider and horse alike. An artillery barrage of lightning exploded all around him, and there was nowhere the promising young law student could hide from the terrors of nature's wrath. Just as his skin felt the cold water penetrating through his felt hat and woolen jacket, a white-hot bolt struck the ground next to him with a deafening rip. The horse whinnied and reared in terror, and moments later the young man awoke, lying in the mud, rain pouring on his face as if to rouse him from his unconsciousness. In terror, he cried out to the God he subconsciously believed had assaulted him. "I shall become a monk," he proclaimed. Like the foxhole prayer of a soldier facing impending peril, the young Martin Luther promised to give his life to the service of God. That moment would not only change the course of his life, but also the destinies of countless millions who would follow his influence. His words would eventually lead to a face-to-face showdown with the most powerful political entity on the planet, and lead to 30 years of brutal war on the continent. His writings would go on to reawaken the church from its slumber to the true meaning of the gospel, and would inspire and guide a movement that we're still part of today, 500 years later. Welcome everyone to 5 Good Minutes. My name is Dan Shields, and I get the privilege of serving as part of the worship team here at Orchard Hill Church. And today, we're going to begin a study of one of the most poignant and condensed presentations of the basic doctrines of Christianity in the whole Bible. And we're going to, like the Catholic Church in their conflict with Martin Luther, be confronted with the true meaning of the gospel. We're going to examine Paul's letter to the churches in the region of Galatia in today's central Turkey. We'll spend the next 5 days talking about the introductory chapter to this great book. The world of Martin Luther's time was dominated by the imposing power and influence of the Catholic Church. It was the era of genius in Rome, names like Michelangelo and Raphael and Da Vinci, and it was a place of corruption and intrigue. Soon after his lightning bolt experience, the young Luther was true to his word, and he dropped out of law school to the derision of his father and became an apprentice monk. The German monastery he entered was particularly rigorous. The young novices would spend their days in Spartan surroundings, cold stone and rough clothing in rooms that Buddhist monks would consider austere. Their day was long and arduous. They awoke before 2 a.m. for prayers. At 4, they would attend Mass. At 5, reading and prayer again. At 6, another service, and then breakfast. By 7, they were doing chores, and the rest of the day was a never-ending cycle of prayers, services, and chores until their exhausted bedtime at 8 p.m. Because they believed the path to heaven was traveled along a road of penitence and suffering, they were often underclothed in the cold, always hungry, and never had enough sleep. There was a high mortality rate among them. In their training, they were taught 2 clear truths of the Bible. The first was that God was a holy God who stood as a harsh judge of hopeless sinners. The second was that they themselves were those sinners who deserved this judgment. But there was another truth that they didn't grasp that was perhaps the most important truth in the Bible. It was that God, in his loving kindness, had made a way by the perfect sacrifice of his Son for hopeless sinners to be called beloved children. It was the way of grace, and it was this shocking revelation that Martin Luther was about to discover as he began to read the book of Galatians.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.